Plötzensee Prison, Berlin, December 22nd, 1942. A basement cell. Iron hooks protrude from the ceiling. A piano wire is tied to one of them. A thin wire that doesn't snap the neck. It squeezes. Slowly. Sentences in wartime Germany were commonplace. Deserters, saboteurs, and members of the resistance were eliminated. But this time, it was different. The Germans weren't just passing sentences, they were sending a message. A message to Moscow. Because the people they were executing were not ordinary conspirators. They were agents of the largest Soviet spy network in European history. The Germans called it Rote Kapelle, the Red Orchestra. Radio operators, in counterintelligence jargon, were pianists. Many pianists made an orchestra. Red, because it played for Moscow. For 4 years, this network operated in the heart of the Reich. 4 key agents, with a team of 50 people, leaked every secret of Nazi Germany to Moscow. Military plans from the Luftwaffe, economic data from ministries, ciphers from Brussels, Paris, Amsterdam. It was considered one of the most effective intelligence networks in the history of secret services. And the most terrifying part of this story isn't that they were exposed. It's how they were caught. Not by their own mistake, not by betrayal, but by Moscow's mistake. Because of that error, 49 people were killed. The network's leader survived and received 10 years in the Gulag. From his own side, the Soviets, whom he worked for. This is a story that makes your blood run cold, and it begins with 4 people in 4 corners of Europe. Without this backstory, you won't understand what happened. Sit back and relax. It's going to be interesting. Berlin, the Air Ministry building on Wilhelmstrasse, one of the most heavily guarded buildings in the Reich. Everything related to the German Air Force was here. Bombing plans, intelligence reports, data on new aircraft. Every document was classified. Every floor had restricted access. A man in an Oberleutnant's uniform passes the guard post. He smiles at the duty officer, goes up to his floor, sits down at his government desk, opens a folder, reads, makes notes, closes it. Everything is routine. Everything is on schedule. By evening, the contents of that folder will be in the hands of Soviet intelligence. His name is Haro Schulze-Boysen, 30 years old, an aristocrat, grand-nephew of Admiral Tirpitz, the same one whose name graced the largest battleship of the Kaiser's fleet. Impeccable pedigree, party membership card, outwardly, the ideal officer of the Reich. In reality, the most valuable agent of Soviet intelligence in Berlin. He didn't need to crack safes. Sneak into other offices, bribe secretaries. Folders were brought to him, officially, by virtue of his position. The state itself placed secrets on his desk, and he passed them to the enemy. For 4 years, every working day. Why? Because in 1933, SA stormtroopers beat him on the street. Just like that. For suspicious appearance. They broke his ribs. He lay in a hospital bed and decided, not someday, not abstractly, but concretely, with broken bones, that this system had to be destroyed. From within. Luftwaffe plans, production data, information on offensives, everything went to Moscow for 4 years. But he wasn't alone. 400 meters from Wilhelmstrasse, another building, another ministry, another man. The Reich Ministry of Economics. Quiet corridors, card catalogs, graphs on the walls, the dullest place in all of Berlin. At a desk sits a man in a civilian suit, glasses, a neat part in his hair. No general's epaulets, no aristocratic airs. An economist, a bureaucrat, Arvid Harnack, doctor of jurisprudence, Rockefeller Scholarship recipient. He studied in Wisconsin, where he became a Marxist, where he married an American, where he decided that Nazism was a catastrophe that needed to be stopped. On his desk were not bombing plans, numbers, dry, boring, deadly, dangerous numbers. How many tanks the Reich produced per month? How many planes rolled off the assembly line? Where the oil came from? Where the tungsten ran out? Where the bottlenecks in production were? For Soviet intelligence, this was more valuable than military plans. Plans become outdated in a week. Economics is a map of weaknesses, a map of where to strike to make the machines stop working. Schulze-Boysen provided military secrets. Harnack provided economic data, 2 desks, 2 ministries, a complete X-ray picture of the Reich, from within. But neither of them could transmit information directly to Moscow. For that, a man with a radio station was needed. He sat in an attic in Brussels. Night. A residential building. Top floor. A curtained window. On the table, a portable radio transmitter. Next to it, a cipher pad. A man in headphones. Mikhail Makarov, a Soviet military intelligence officer. He wasn't a spy in the classic sense. He didn't recruit, didn't photograph documents, didn't attend receptions. He was the wire, the only line of communication between agents in Europe and the center in Moscow. Every night, the same routine. Unfurl the antenna, tune the frequency, encrypt the text, key, ... 30 minutes on air. Retract the antenna, hide the transmitter, disappear until tomorrow. 30 minutes. Remember that number. Because in 30 minutes, 3 trucks with directional antennas, if they are positioned at different ends of the city, can pinpoint the source of a signal to within a floor. Every broadcast is a scream in a dark room. You don't see who's in the room, but someone hears, and they're getting closer. Makarov would be the least fortunate of all. But before his story, the 4th person, the one who managed the entire machine. Paris, an unassuming street in the center, a small shop, books. Behind the counter, a middle-aged man. Polish accent, neat suit, a welcoming smile. Customers come in, browse, leave. Sometimes they buy, sometimes not. An ordinary bookseller, an ordinary day. Leopold Trepper, head of the entire Western European network of Soviet military intelligence, the GRU. The most wanted spy on the continent managed an empire from behind a bookstore counter. And before Paris, Brussels. And what he did in Brussels, it makes you want to laugh and give a standing ovation simultaneously. He opened a factory. A real commercial factory. Manufacturing raincoats. The excellent raincoat company. Real customers. Real orders. Real taxes. Belgian officials checked the accounting. Everything was clean. Inside, funding for agents, safe houses, communication channels with Moscow, fake passports. Europe's largest spy network operated under the guise of a raincoat factory. From Brussels, Trepper moved to Paris. From raincoats to books. A different facade, the same job. Coordinating radio operators in 3 countries, appointing couriers, organizing dead drops, managing people he saw once a month, or never saw at all. And now, stop. Because around these 4, there is no emptiness. Around them are 50 more people, and each of them paid one price for admission: their life. Libertas Schulze-Boysen, Haro's wife, 30 years old. She worked for a film company connected to the Reich's propaganda apparatus, secretly collected photographs of war crimes on the Eastern Front, images of massacres, village destruction. She hid them for a future tribunal which she believed was inevitable. Mildred Harnack, Arvid's wife, an American from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a literary scholar, taught at the University of Berlin, recruited students, quiet, inconspicuous, wearing glasses, the only citizen of the United States whom Adolf Hitler would personally order to be executed. But that was later. Kurt Schumacher, a sculptor. Oda Schottmüller, a dancer. Horst Heilmann, a young cryptographer. All lived double lives. All knew the price of a mistake. 50 people in several countries. 4 years. Not a single failure. Until Moscow gave an order that would doom them all. No, here's what happened. Schulze-Boysen sent a warning to Moscow. Germany would attack the Soviet Union. The date, June 22, 1941. The directions of the main thrusts. Stalin received the report. and did exactly what he did with Sorger's report from Tokyo. Ignored it. June 22nd happened. Every strike. Exactly where they said. Every direction. Predicted. And now that airfields were burning and the army was retreating, Moscow remembered it had a network in Europe. Now the center wanted to listen. It sent an order, transmit more often, in more detail. Radio operators had to stay on air longer. Not 10 minutes, 30. Not 30, an hour. Moscow needed information. Moscow needed it now. Wait. Do you understand what they just did? Every extra minute on air is a minute during which a truck with an antenna drives down your street. The center ordered its agents to shout louder, in a room where people with microphones were standing. And the people with microphones were already listening. Let's move to the most sinister Wehrmacht unit that few have heard of. The Funkabwehr, the radio intelligence service. Located in Berlin, in the same city where Schulze-Boysen went to work every morning. Their sole task was to listen to the airwaves, to catch enemy transmitters. They knew professionals were operating in Berlin and the occupied countries, Soviet agents. Somewhere a key was tapping, and someone was transmitting Reich secrets to the east. The Funkabwehr had broadcast times, frequencies, and session durations. What they didn't have were names. They didn't know who was behind the transmitter. Yet. But they had something better than names. Antennas. And here's what happened next. This very moment decided the fate of the entire network. A specific night. Summer of 41. Brussels. A residential neighborhood. 3 a.m. A truck with a directional antenna on its roof slowly drives down an empty street. Headlights off. In the cab, an operator in headphones. He rotates the antenna. The signal is weak. Turns a corner, stronger. Another turn, even stronger. The operator raises his hand. Stop. Records the azimuth. A second truck, from the other side of the city, does the same. A third, from the south. In the morning, 3 lines on a map. 3 azimuths. Intersection, Rue des Atribats, number 101. Top floor. Attic. Someone was broadcasting there for 27 minutes. That's enough. But the Germans don't burst in. They are patient. They are professionals. They understand. Capturing one radio operator means capturing one radio operator. Waiting means capturing the entire network. They listen. Record. Keep a log. Broadcast time, duration, frequency, the distinctive signature of the key. Each radio operator taps slightly differently, like a signature. Every night, a new bearing. Every new bearing, another address, another dot on the map. The network emerges, like a photograph in Developer. Slowly, inexorably, with no chance to stop it. You can deceive a person, forge a document, change a name, lie to someone's face. But you cannot deceive an antenna. Radio waves cannot lie. And the radio operators, by order of the center, broadcast every night. Louder, longer. Moscow demands information. The radio operators transmit. The trucks listen. The circle narrows. December 13th, 1941. 6 months of surveillance. The Germans are ready. Night. The Abwehr, military counterintelligence, dispatches an arrest team to Rue des Atribats, house 101, top floor. The door is kicked in. Inside, Makarov, at the table. Headphones on his head, key under his right hand. The transmitter, still warm. He was transmitting at the moment of arrest. Nearby, cipher pads, addresses, call signs, frequencies. Makarov is arrested. And a few days later, he talked. And now, a cascade. That type of failure where one arrest pulls another, and that one pulls 3 more, and within 6 months, only ashes remain of the network. Makarov gave up his contacts. The contacts gave up meeting points. The meeting points gave up other radio operators. The radio operators gave up couriers. By the spring of 42, the network in Belgium was crushed. Transmitters seized. Agents in cells. But the Berlin group Still intact. Schulze-Boysen goes to work. Harnack compiles. Reports. The Germans know the orchestra is bigger than Belgium, but they don't know who is playing in Berlin. And then, a blow that turns the entire story upside down. Listen carefully, because this is the moment for which everything is being told. Among the intercepted radio messages, one from Moscow, October 41. The center ordered the establishment of direct contact with the Berlin group. And in the text of the radio message, which was transmitted over the airwaves that the Germans were listening to, the center specified names. In plain text, Harrow, Schulze-Boysen, Luftwaffe, address. This wasn't a cipher, not a code name, a surname, a position, a place of work. In a radio message, German decoders cracked this intercept by August 42. Read the text. Oberleutnant, Luftwaffe, one of their own. 4 years. August 30th. Morning. Schulze-Boysen arrives at work, shows his pass, goes up to his floor, sits at his desk, folder, like every day. A minute later, a knock at the door. Gestapo. A few days later, Harnack. Then their wives. Then circle after circle, dozens of people. The Berlin group, which had lived a double life within the Nazi state for 4 years, collapsed in weeks. He was not ruined by an enemy, not by a traitor, not by an error on a mission. He was ruined by a bureaucrat in a Moscow office who decided it's faster to send the names in plain text than to bother with the cipher of a separate channel. Typed the text, pressed the key, went to lunch. 4 years of work, the deaths of 50 people, the price of one radio message sent by a lazy person, and now, the sentences. And this part cannot be rushed. You cannot say, they were sentenced, and move on to the next paragraph. Harrow Schulze-Boysen. The sentence was carried out on December 22nd, 1942. Plötzensee Prison, Berlin. The cell with iron hooks on the ceiling. He was 33. According to several testimonies, a piano wire. A thin wire that doesn't break the neck. It squeezes. Slowly. This is not a metaphor. It is a documented method that the Nazis applied to traitors to the nation. Later, after the July 20th assassination attempt on Hitler, they would film such procedures. For pleasure. Libertas, his wife, 30 years old, the one who collected photographs of crimes. Her sentence was carried out. She wrote letters from her cell. One reached her mother, Arvid Harnack, the same day, the same ceiling, the same method. Mildred Harnack, Arvid's wife, an American from Milwaukee, a literary scholar, a quiet woman in glasses who taught German literature to students and passed information to Soviet intelligence. The first trial, a military tribunal, gave her 6 years in prison. 6 years. Hitler was informed. He demanded a review. One word. Destroy her. On February 16, 1943, Mildred Harnack's sentence was carried out, in Plötzensee prison. The last words she uttered, Ich habe Deutschland auch so geliebt. I, too, loved Germany so much. The only citizen of the United States executed by direct order of Adolf Hitler. 49 people, at least. The exact number is unknown. Some did not survive interrogations. Papers for all were not preserved. Bureaucracy destroys, but does not always keep records. Among those sentenced were people under 25. Horst Heilmann, the cryptographer, was sentenced. Oda Schottmüller, the dancer, was sentenced. They were not professional spies. They were people who decided that remaining silent was worse than taking a risk. And for that decision, each paid the price at Plötzensee. 49. They were gone. But the network's leader, Trepper, was alive. For now. He was in Paris. He watched as one cell after another fell. Brussels, crushed. Berlin, crushed. He understood. The net was closing. The question wasn't if, but when. And the answer was soon. But what would happen after his arrest, no one could have predicted. November 1942. Paris. The Germans find Trepper, not through agents, not through betrayal. A routine document check in a cafe on the Champs-Élysées. He was drinking coffee. A patrol asked for identification. His photograph matched the description that German counterintelligence had been circulating for months. The man who had managed Europe's largest spy network for 4 years was caught during a document check over a cup of coffee. Arrested. Taken for interrogation. And here, a twist that makes this story stop being a thriller and becomes something for which there is no genre. Trepper offered the Germans a deal. He would work as a double agent, transmit disinformation to Moscow, under Gestapo control. Operation Big Game, Funkspiel, a radio game. The Germans agreed. They took the transmitters of the destroyed agents and began sending false messages to Moscow, purportedly from people who were already arrested or no longer alive. Moscow accepted. Moscow did not check. Moscow believed. Pause here. The very same people who disbelieved Schulze-Boysen's genuine warnings about Germany's attack now unconditionally believed German counterintelligence's fakes, which came from the names of those who were already gone. The irony is so thick you could cut bread with it. But Trepper was playing his own game, a third one. He cooperated with the Germans and simultaneously sought a way to warn Moscow. In '43, he managed to send a message through a surviving agent. Everything you are receiving is a lie. All transmitters are under German control. Believe nothing. Moscow received the warning and did not react. Because admitting that you had been deceived for months meant admitting incompetence. And in a system where incompetence led to elimination, it was easier to keep believing, easier to ignore, easier to shift responsibility. Bureaucratic inertia, the best friend of any enemy. September 1943. Trepper asked his guards for permission to go to the dentist. Toothache. By this point, the Germans already considered him one of their own. He was cooperating. He was playing the radio game. Why would he run? They permitted it. No handcuffs. One guard. Trepper entered the clinic, sat in the chair, asked the guard to wait in the reception area, got out of the chair, exited through the back door, onto the street, into Paris, into the underground. The French resistance. They hid him. The Germans searched. Didn't find him. Trepper lived to see the liberation of Paris. January 1945. The war ends. Trepper is alive. His agents, most of them are gone. Those not killed by the Germans are in prison. Trepper decided to return to Moscow, voluntarily. He believed he would be met as a hero. For 4 years, he had built and managed the largest intelligence network in occupied Europe. He had warned about the German radio game. He had escaped the Gestapo. He survived. He flew to Moscow, stepped off the plane. He was arrested. On the airfield, from the plane's ramp, into a Black Maria, Lubyanka, interrogations. The same basements where Nazi prisoners were interrogated, now for their own. 10 years in the camps. For what? For network failure. For cooperation with the enemy. For being caught by the Germans. It didn't matter that he escaped. It didn't matter that he warned them. It didn't matter that the network failed because of a radio message sent by the center. The fault, Trepper's. Because in that system, the one on the front lines was always to blame, not the one who sent names over the radio from a Moscow office. Consider the symmetry. The Gestapo eliminated the Red Orchestra agents as traitors to the Reich. The NKVD imprisoned the survivors as traitors to the Soviet Union. The same people, traitors to both sides, simultaneously. Those who risked their lives for one system were destroyed by that very system. The Germans killed them for spying. Moscow punished them for being caught. The only difference was the font on the sentence. Trepper was released in '54, after Stalin's death. Rehabilitated. He moved to Poland. Then, to Israel, where he passed away in '82. But before that, he wrote a book, The Great Game. Memoirs detailing, with names and dates, how his own leadership destroyed the network he built. How agents' names were sent in plain text. How warnings were ignored. How those who survived were punished. Moscow banned the book. Of course. Mildred Harnack, an American from Milwaukee, a literary scholar, a quiet woman executed on Hitler's orders. The Germans killed her for espionage. The Russians forgot her because she was an agent's wife, not an agent. The Americans didn't notice because she worked for the USSR, 3 systems, and not one found a place for her, 77 years later. In 2020, the state of Wisconsin, the very one where she once studied, declared September 16th Mildred Harnack Day. A plaque. A date on the calendar, 77 years later. Wrote Capella, a name invented by the enemy. Moscow never gave these people its own name. 4 key figures, 50 around them, 4 years, 3 countries, 49 sentences, 1 gulag, 1 radio message that destroyed them all. The Red Orchestra was undone by a radio signal, trucks with antennas, physics that cannot be deceived. But the next spy transmitted secrets not by radio. He transmitted them at cocktail parties, with a glass of champagne in hand, in a white suit, in Cairo, surrounded by generals who planned to destroy his country. And he was undone not by the Gestapo, not by a direction finder, not by a decipherer. He was undone by his wife. But that is another story.